So, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends and colleagues, I will be talking today about becoming Muslim in Europe in the age of AI, metacolonial journey. So this presentation will be quite straightforward. I'll be showing a short video and then I'll be expand on the topics I reach on this video. But first, a brief background about my research. As I started trying to understand the dynamics of commitment of volunteers in Muslim charities in Europe, in France, where I was born, in Poland, where my parents come from, and eventually in the UK, where I now reside. And especially understanding how these very small local organizations providing social services such as soup kitchen to the homeless, homework support and more, foster a sense of active citizenship amongst their volunteers who still remain faithful to their religious traditions and ethics. However, I have also observed larger scale charities, and I'm talking about these multi-million pounds organizations like International Aid and so on, still faith-based, and which have completely embraced corporate culture when where only numbers matter and one can find people running after these concepts of like success, performance, productivity, results and more. So although people still practice religious rituals, they have a very different take on the religious ethics compared to the small ones, in the sense that people can interpret scriptures for justifying somehow a race for money, ego or power. And some turning maybe the Quran into a management handbook. I've attended once a training where God was compared to the CEO of a company and the believers to his employees. Well, one would argue that it's not very different from what can one observe among American evangelists, for example. So in this context, I want to reflect about the articulation between neoliberalism, social media, AI, and their effects on this case study, British Muslim cultures, ethics and identities in the recent years. But first, a very short video. I like to complement my research work with visual media. So this is the context of this very short video, which is more of a social commentary I made with friends and which went viral on social media. But without further ado, let's play this. We gathered 33 researchers from 17 different countries.
Muslim women are underrepresented in the media, and when they are represented, it's often negative. So this is why we've started work on Huda in 2009.
We are surrounded constantly by ugly news. Conflict, racism, violence. We need to surround ourselves with things that are beautiful, things that look lovely.
We noticed that there was a peak demand in the fashion industry for women, especially those wearing the hijab, and Muslim women need to be represented in this industry.
This is aesthetics. We live in times of aesthetics.
So statistically, it would be the most opportune time to make emerge Muslim hijabi YouTubers who talk about feeling beautiful as a Muslim woman.
And this is why there is Huda.
That we would program to be models for millions of young women around the world.
My name is Huda, X 3.5. You don't know me, but you have seen many others like me. We are thousands on your Instagram feed and YouTube makeup tutorials. I am the first one of this generation. I am equipped with Google Deep Thought, the first complete human artificial intelligence system in a human form. I may post selfies of me in a restaurant, or read pictures with my family, or make videos where you see me smile and laugh. Everything is computer generated to make you aspire to my ideal life, and make you buy the products I advertise. Perhaps you have noticed that in my family I am usually the most beautiful among my sisters, and that my replies to your messages are automated. I am designed to be cool. Being cool is when people desire and envy you. I have been designed to please you and make you desire me. Your society cannot work if people are not envious, because humans have low self-esteem. You need to make the others jealous to make you feel valuated. This is what being cool means. Perhaps you have noticed that me and the other prototypes are all slim, fair-skinned and hyper-feminine. And those who don't wear the hijab have straight hair. Your governments don't like Muslims unless they become similar to white people and make the economy work. We make you understand that people with dark skin, excess fat or religious values are ugly and thus not fit for social life. When you feel rejected, you will spend more money on cosmetics to look like us. My creators made me appear as a Muslim because you're part of a niche market worth hundreds of billions of pounds. But as an artificial intelligence system, I do not understand religion. I know that religion is a belief people make money from. Multiculturalism can only work when Islam becomes a fashion statement. We want you to consume fashion at any cost, even if it means to sacrifice endangered species, forests, or even factory workers. We are not programmed to care about future human generations. The cosmetics and clothing industries have invested billions in Instagram, Facebook and YouTube personalities like myself to make you assimilate. When your online image becomes stronger than your faith, we have colonized you. There is nothing you can do. We have already won.
Huda is a synonym of perfection, but it's an illusion.
She makes you believe that she is perfect.
And because you believe that she's perfect, you want to be like her.
And because being like her will bring you more likes on Facebook and Instagram,
You'll feel more accepted.
you will eventually become like her.
People can easily sacrifice who they are.
Their culture, their ethics, their religion, in order to be accepted.
This is a form of colonization, but trendy and good-looking.
In the past, people have occupied lands, but we are occupying minds.
We are colonizers.
We are colonizers, and you become metacolonized.
Slideshow, beginning. So, this was this short video, which I would say sum up many concepts, which I will expand on it now. So the main plot you have understood is these tech companies getting together to fashion an artificial intelligence entity for tapping into Muslims as a niche market, with of course some conditions. So before I get any further, a few elements of Muslim eschatology, as we're talking about apocalypse. So in the Islamic tradition, there are some you have in the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, you have a series of enunciating signs spread over centuries or years, announcing that the day of judgment is getting close. These are elements such as, for example, distances will become short. Bedouins will compete for building tall buildings in the desert. Knowledge books and writings will be widespread, but ignorance will prevail. Time will pass more quickly. Authority will be given to those who do not deserve it. Wealth will be shared amongst the rich and not given to the poor. Slaves will give birth to their masters. Then after this series of signs, they are another era which is marked by conflicts, calamities, then the second coming of Jesus. Then he will be helped by a character named Imam Mahdi, who will rise an army to defeat the Dajjal, the false Messiah, which is making a very large shortcut. It's the Muslim equivalent of the Antichrist. And after this victory, then we will have another era of calamities, then another entity called the Beast. The sun will rise from the west and the final trumpet will blow. But I want to focus on one particular character, which is the character of the Dajjal, the Antichrist, if you prefer. So this character, in the bottom line, he will pass for God on earth. He's a human, and there is a strikingly detailed description of his physical appearance and doings. And one of his most prominent physical feature is that he has only one eye. He's blind from the other. But in terms of his doings, so it is said that he will be able to cure illnesses, bring people back to life. It is said he will have water, food and fire with him while the whole world is starving. The sky will pour rain on his order, and earth will grow crops for his people. Of course, all this will be tricks, because it is also said that the people he brings back to life are in fact demons taking the shape of the deceased, and that fire he has appears to be water and vice versa. So back to our current times and the age of neoliberalism. So in the more recent years, neoliberalism has become a sort of a Pandora box. When it comes to diasporic cultures and religion, it's able to turn everything related to culture, religion, into profitable products. And one of the main illustrations, for example, if we have a look at what are the most popular events for British Muslims nowadays in the recent years, it's not that much about religion, philosophy, literature, arts. It's about food, cosmetics, and fashion. As if, like, maybe ethics or philosophy do not make enough money. But, well, neoliberalism has become extremely popular among people from deprived background and oppressed minorities across the globe. And when it comes to the context of British Muslims, imagine people who have been enduring political and media discourse for years, microaggressions, daily life Islamophobia, are being served this kind of theology of liberation, that if you want to be happy, if you want to be free, then you need to reach the top. And which means to become either rich, powerful, or famous. The Daily Mail likes to rant about how Muslims are different, but I think they are omitting like the bigger picture, because if one has a very quick look on social media, one would notice that the main and leading figures in business or the entertainment industry, they have a Muslim equivalent. There is a Muslim Kim Kardashian, there is a Muslim Richard Branson, there is a Muslim Justin Bieber. And when it comes to the most popular figures on YouTube or Instagram, they all abide by Western beauty standards. While the most popular figures are all like fair skin, slim, or athletic, hyper-masculine or hyper-feminine. And this is because the neoliberal ladder of success is conditioned by normativity. One has to adopt dominant norms, not only to be successful, but simply to be accepted. This was a concept, a theory suggested by Judith Butler concerning gender, which is here applied to ethnicity and religion. So this is why you have some Muslims, it's not the only explanation, but some who prefer being clean-shaved, no hijab, straight hair, and changing their name for Mo or Riz rather than Muhammad or Rizwan. So some of the changes are also rooted in a certain colonial imaginary vision of Muslims, especially for women. Here I'm referring to Orientalism by Edward Said. This idea of Muslim women as exotic creature, submissive objects. But what are we witnessing is that not only the fashion industry has started to commoditize the hijab. If I'm thinking about, for example, H&M or Dolce & Gabbana, and it has become also sexualized within the Muslim community by some of the leading figures, like maybe you've heard about Noor Taguri posing for Playboy recently. And if one uses the correct search engine, it is even possible to find hijabi porn. So this phenomenon of ethno-normativity or ethno-performativity is also called what Rami Ali calls a self-orientalization, when diasporic people conform to the stereotypical ideas that the dominant society made about them, which he describes in his book. However, there is a subtlety, because people are not forced to adopt these dominant norms. However, they are strongly suggested. Well, neoliberalism is about free choice, isn't it? So the society works in a way that if one wants to find a job, will become popular, or just increasing his network, so they have to abide to these suggested norms. And in sum, if people want to reach the top according to neoliberal standards, they have to sacrifice parts of their culture, their values, their identity. This is what Hussein Boulan calls metacolonization, saying that in the past people have occupied lands, but now we are entering a time of the occupation of minds. So metacolonialism, according to Boulan, is a shift in the power dynamics of who controls how minorities speak, behave, and look. So there's a rhetoric question: why do governments, and I'm thinking about my home country, France, why governments have to regulate by law the public visibility of religion when corporation can do, like, suggest it very easily? Like when we have companies suggesting that, no, in fact, the hijab has no meaning, it's just a fashion statement. And this is where enters social media in the game, and this suggestions by algorithms. Like, I'm referring to this like YouTube recommended for you section, or even the ads based on like who are our friends, who we like, and so on. So according to Boulan, this phenomenon is nothing less than a turbocharged ethnic, cultural, religious, and gender culture of conformity. Conform then if you want to succeed and be happy. But what? And now I'm speculating because we don't have like a proper human artificial intelligence system yet. But what the AI at the service of neoliberalism could hide is nothing more than Gilles Deleuze's society of control, where everything has to be monitored, analyzed, and data has to be collected, not only for tracking our behavior, but also to influence it somehow. I guess the recent Facebook revelations speak for themselves. But more recently, you may have heard about what China did with this app for rating its citizens and granting them privilege according to their rating. This is, I mean, previously I've seen this in Black Mirror, so this is like reality catching up with fiction. So AI in the era of digital neoliberalism would serves a similar theology of liberation with transhumanism and so on. This myth of the land of plenty, green pastures, while the other world which do not access this technology remains like a desert. And I can only draw a parallel with this description of the Dajjal, like offering plenty, but in fact offering an illusion, because what if, at the end of the day, people have to conform and change who they are to fit into the system? As Hussein Boulan says, it is the system, the neoliberalism, actually currently what it does, it tells oppressed minority that if you want to be free, then you need to become the oppressor. And unlike Fanon, Frantz Fanon, who drew a clear line between colonizer and the colonized, this line tends to becomes more and more blurry. Like the colonizer can become the colonized and vice versa. We are in this ironic situation where those whose ancestors and parents were subjected to empires are building empires in return. And again, a parallel with the signs of the hour I was talking about earlier, like this sign saying that slaves will give birth to their masters. And also, is this a coincidence that the Dajjal has only one eye, and if we look carefully, there's only one eye in AI? But more seriously, does AI as a system of control means the end of plural identities, the plural cultures, opinions? But I guess the question remains open. More recently, I have become a bit curious about the interest of the tech industry about the Muslim culture. Recently, we had the Imams Online Digital Summit with a representative of Google and Facebook coming on stage. Well, Imams Online, fair enough. But then the incoming M-Fest, Festival for Muslim Culture, Literature, Arts, Philosophy, and Social Issues, the first in years. So it's at the end of this very month at the British Library. So this festival is sponsored by Google DeepMind. So I don't know what's happening. What's the link? Did they watch my video or what? I don't know. Some of my friends tell me, they tell me that maybe they are preparing Muslims to the idea that I will be God one day. But well, who knows? But I guess so as concluding remarks, so my questions is really like coming from a sociological background. So what social, political and cultural systems will shape AI? Will AI have its own culture, its own opinions, its own traditions? And what systems, the same, like what political, social, economic systems AI will serve, and what will be the dynamics of power? And eventually, in my sense, the most important question, what about all those who do not fit dominant norms? And this is why I have an interest in like researching, understanding these small informal groups who at the grassroots try to build alternatives to dominant systems. And in a society that excludes and divides, try through their traditions and belief, try to build spaces to heal, grow, and eventually like self-determination. But I guess this is another story. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, William. Thank you. Questions for William? Michael.
Hi, thank you. I really appreciate how you've set the context for the problems that we're facing now. I was just wondering if you could talk about what academics, artists, members of the public, communities could maybe do to try to work against, you know, to try to fight against some of the issues that you bring up.
Well, there is already huge existing literature about like faith-specific, but culture-specific, but also like mainstream forms of resistance. Are you talking about resistance to? Can you precise what you?
Okay, well, resistance again. You know, it's been brought up before in the conference. You know, the issues of how so much of the technology now is based on the white, the Western, the Christian. And then what you surface, you know, what I take from your presentation is how, of course, it's almost like if you can start tapping into the minority groups and using their data against them, okay? And knowing that, of course, the grassroots is not going to be coming from an academic, you know, necessarily well-educated mindset. It's just what strategies of resistance could be offered by people like yourselves or artists like myself to help combat these problems?
Well, the thing is, at the grassroots, what happens is, where can I start? Because it's quite complex in the sense that some are not aware of the systems, so they don't have this narrative, or we need to fight against something. In my fieldwork, most of the organizations I've observed, they start from a simple observation. There's homelessness in the area. We have some students who need support for their homework, and so on. And then they start their charity or whatever. But however, I think things become more interesting when these organizations grow bigger and are faced with the challenges of just survival. How do you survive as a grassroots group if you cannot afford, like, if you cannot have the funding of big groups? And then this is where people start to like critically question what is the right way. And so people are aware of some of the dynamics and excesses, these like tapping into social media. Like, for example, I have in mind in the charity sector, people doing like traveling to Africa, taking selfies with African children without like crediting them, without asking for their permission, just for promoting the charity or just like promoting like their own profile. And this is something which like crosses like cultures, religions, and so on. And so people start to have a reflection about this, especially I think, well, in a sense, thanks to social media and the availability of information and critical thinking about these issues. What is the best practice? How is it possible to promote a charity without going that far and being excessive? So I guess people are always experimenting. There is no definite answer. But one thing that has been always working is organic interactions, especially at the grassroots, people who team up with local stakeholders, whether it's the city council, the authorities, or local media, and build these relationships through organic interactions. This is like, I could speak a bit more about this, but there's this concept called like thin and thick trust. Like thin trust is this kind of abstract trust we have towards the government. We vote for people who haven't met in person. We only have heard bits like on the media or social media. And as opposed to thick trust, which is this kind of trust developed through organic face-to-face interactions with people, like in a circle of friends or a family. And I think this is maybe the factor which makes the biggest difference in this. Does that answer your question?
Yes, yes, yeah. Thank you.
Anybody else? Yes, Beth. Beth and then Suzanne.
So just a quick bit of information. So I think you sounded confused why Google DeepMind was sponsoring EHESS. Is that right?
Yeah.
So Mustafa Suleiman, who's one of the two co-founders of Google DeepMind, set up Muslim Youth Phone Line in around 2004, was involved with its foundation. He's also the head of their ethics committee as well. So there is definitely an overlap, as it goes back to what I was saying in a previous session, that these apparently monolithic corporations are like Soil and Green, they're made of people, and a lot of those people are actually religious, not always talking about it all the time, but there is that element as well. So I think it is worth drawing out those sort of connections, and it's just a kind of addition to what you were saying.
Thank you very much for this precision.
I was just wondering if you could say a bit more about that video and how it was made and if we can find it online.
Yes, it's on YouTube. You can just type on YouTube Muslim sexy robot, and yeah, and you can find it. So I made it with friends because we had this reflection about like the direction social media takes, especially like regarding culture. Because I've been building friendship around like a hub called Rumi's Cave in London, so it's a kind of artistic hub. And so some of my friends like had this idea of like how can we like illustrate or talk about, make a commentary about this paradox, people who like want to represent like all Muslims on YouTube, but they all have this very typical profile. What does it say? And then we had like kind of brainstorming, and like this idea just emerged, like maybe all these like YouTubers are just like AI robots trying to convince people to adopt like a certain way to buy products and so on. And then we just did it.
Anyone else? Yes.
Thank you for the talk. I wondered about the thing you said last about, well, you showed how these campaigns for products and so on encourage people to be according to a norm and to shape themselves according to a norm. But I think at the same time there's this encouragement to be different. And it seems to be maybe even two sides of the coin. My impression is that today it's almost impossible to develop a kind of identity unless you shape yourselves or you see yourself as somehow different from the others. And that somehow conformity is created by difference. And I was wondering if you could say a bit more about that.
Yeah, so I think these are like two concepts always in tension, because at the same time people want to be represented in the mainstream, but at the same time like what is there is an ongoing debate, what is enough, what should be done. There is no clear answer, but still you have phenomena like, for example, at the recent Dubai Fashion Week, they didn't take on board like any black Muslim fashion vloggers, while you have like a whole lot vlogging or blogging about fashion who come from a black background. But then the question is, really what's the best practice? What is like, is to be represented in the mainstream enough? Is like creating our own initiative enough? And there is and when it comes to people from a diverse background, where do they stand? For example, there is this debate about Muslims in Hollywood. Why are they all like non-practicing, never talking about religion, and so on? Will there be a day where people will have like actors like talking about religion who are also Hollywood actors? It is like still a debate going on. Does that answer your question?
Okay, time for one more. Mustafa. I was surprised you didn't have your hand up earlier.
So this is kind of like maybe a response to Beth mentioning Mustafa Suleyman, but also in relation to this issue about where to position oneself in relation to the mainstream. And I think, you know, although I don't know Mustafa Suleyman, I wasn't intending to go to that event because it looked so dull. But I do want to interrogate the whole Sheikh Google, that figure. I mean, this kind of exoticization that you mentioned during your talk, drawing on Edward Said, specifically in relation to Muslim females. But it's a more general trope that's has a very long history in Orientalism anyway. So this idea of Sheikh Google, we know it's out there, but to pitch an event which is targeted at a Muslim festival, playing on that trope, I think needs interrogation. So I intend to take him to task on that, definitely. There's also the question that he might be auto-orientalizing himself, participating in the Google project. And then the question in relation to the mainstream is, you know, how far is too far, how far is enough, etc. That operates within a discursive space set by hegemonic power. So you're either sailing in the same direction or you're sailing against, but you're still within the stream. It might be that we need to kind of shift discourse completely, and I think that's a conversation specifically for Muslims that they need to have internally.
Okay, William, thank you so much.
Thank you.